36 weeks after giving birth, I discovered Amish wives were being secretly tested. The house is still dark when I wake. Not night dark, that gray, unsure hour before morning decides itself. The baby is warm against my chest, his breath damp and sweet through my cap strings. Downstairs, cast iron meets wood, slow, careful. The Maud is already up. It is her last morning. My body feels unfinished, heavy in strange places, light in others. When I stand, the floor seems farther away than it used to be. I thought the 6 weeks were a gift. I didn't know they were also a clock. My name is Sarah. This channel is Amish Aunt, and I tell quiet, first-person stories about the things we were never taught to name. If you believe careful stories matter, you're welcome to stay. Subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what did no one explain to you until much later? In our community, the 6 weeks after a baby arrives are meant to be a soft place. We call it lying in, though no one truly lies still. A Maud comes, usually a young unmarried woman, and she steps into your life like it has always been hers. She cooks before you wake. She sweeps without speaking. She moves the older children through their days like water flowing around stone. When your husband comes home, she disappears. This is not rudeness. It is custom. It is modesty made practical. Those weeks I did not touch a broom. I barely touched the floor. The Maud's name was Anna. She braided her hair tight every morning and never hummed, though I could tell she wanted to. The smell of bread followed her everywhere, yeast and warmth and something patient. My hands shook when I lifted the baby at first, and she would pause. Not helping, just near enough that I felt steadier. I mistook that nearness for rest. My body was still sore in ways I didn't have words for. Milk came slow. Sleep came in scraps. Still, I believed I was being carried. The meals began on the second day home. Women from our church district came in quiet rotation. No announcements, no knocking sometimes. Just the creak of the door and a covered dish set down like an offering. They stayed longer than the meals required. They held the baby. They asked how my nights were. They looked around the house while they listened. At the time, it felt like love made visible. I had never been so seen, never so surrounded. I did not yet know the difference between being held and being observed. My aunt came every week. She had taught me to sew straight seams and not to rush bread. She had stood beside me at my wedding, adjusting my prayer cap when my hands shook too much to do it myself. The day she came in the 4th week, she lifted the baby, smiled, and ran one finger along the windowsill in the kitchen. Just once, then she nodded as if to herself. I remember it because it was small, because it meant nothing. Or so I thought. By the 3rd week, the crying started. Mine, not the baby's. Always in the morning, quiet. Turned toward the wall. I didn't know why. The Maud would already be moving downstairs, and the sound of her working made me feel both grateful and ashamed. Gratitude for the help, shame that I needed it. In our Ordnung, a woman's strength is supposed to return neatly. Pain is expected, but endurance is admired. I wanted to be admired again. I didn't yet understand how much that mattered. We grow up breathing Gelassenheit without ever naming it, yielding, accepting, doing without complaint. It isn't taught like a rule. It is taught like gravity. A wife shows her faith through order, in her cupboards, her tone, her body. I believed in this. I still do, in parts. During those weeks, I measured myself constantly against it. How soon could I stand without wincing? How quickly could I smile when someone entered the room? How little help I asked for in front of others. In the 5th week, the deacon's wife came with soup and stayed longer than usual. She stood in the kitchen doorway while Anna worked and said softly, "The Maud has kept things well." The word kept settled strangely in my chest. I nodded, because nodding is what you do. Later, I tried to tell myself I had imagined the weight in her voice, that it was just language, just habit. I did not yet have the courage to pull that thread. On the morning Anna left, there was no farewell. Washed the last pan, folded her apron, and bowed her head while my husband prayed. Then she walked out into the early light. By noon, I stood alone in the kitchen for the first time in 6 weeks. The floor was clean, the counters bare. When a woman arrived that afternoon, no food, no baby talk, just a quiet checking in. I watched her eyes move through the room. That was when the word formed, uninvited. After she left, I stood very still. The baby slept. The clock ticked loud enough to feel like sound. I asked myself a question I had never needed before. What were they looking for? Not dust. The house was clean, not food. The soup still steamed on the stove. It was something quieter, something about me. I began to walk the rooms the way they had, seeing my own life from the doorway, the folded towels, the chair pulled back where I had rested too long, my shoulders rounded when I stood. I felt suddenly exposed, like a window without a curtain I hadn't realized was gone. Over the next days, memory rearranged itself. I could see each visit clearly now, where they paused, what their eyes returned to, the way one woman watched how I stood from the bench, whether I reached for the table or simply rose. Another listened not to my words, but to how easily they came. Did I laugh quickly? Did I sigh? Did I ask my husband for help while anyone else was there? None of it had been written, none of it spoken aloud, and yet it felt precise. As if a measure existed I had never been shown. Test was not a thing you could pass or fail openly. There was no meeting, no mark made on paper. It lived between women. By 6 weeks was expected to return, gently, quietly to herself as she had been before, only with more responsibility. The house should feel settled again. The body should move without hesitation. The marriage should look undisturbed, not perfect, just smooth. Any roughness, if shown, was remembered, talked about carefully, not to harm you, to place you. I thought again of my aunt's finger on the windowsill. I had replayed that moment for days, trying to soften it. Now I understood. She was not searching for dust. She was searching for transfer. Had the Maud's order moved into my hands, would I keep it there? My aunt loved me. That did not change, but love in our world often moves through habit, through standards passed down like recipes. Both things were true at once, and that was the part that hurt the most. There was a woman down the road, Miriam, who had her third child the year before my first. I had noticed how she changed afterward, quieter, more careful with her words. One afternoon when our children slept, I asked her why. She didn't look surprised. She said only, "I was tired and I let it show." Then she folded her hands and added, "Some things take a long time to forget, even for women who mean well." She did not explain further. She did not need to. I carried her sentence home like something fragile. If this story feels familiar to you, if you recognize that quiet measuring, you are not imagining it. You are not alone. If it helps to hear these things named gently, you're welcome to stay with me. And if someone you love has carried something like this in silence, share this with them. Some weights grow lighter when they're finally spoken. The hardest part was not realizing the test existed. It was realizing how naturally I had participated. I had straightened my back without knowing why, smiled when my body asked to rest, passed by most accounts. And yet something inside me felt emptied by that passing. I had been evaluated before I understood I was being seen that way. The system had shaped me so completely that I mistook performance for faith, yielding for peace. I did not become angry. I became awake. I still hold gratitude for those 6 weeks, for the bread, for the prayers, for the hands that lifted my baby when mine shook. I also hold the knowledge of what those weeks required in return. Both live in me now. This morning, light comes through the same kitchen window. I stand where I always have, but I am not waiting to be watched anymore. And if you are standing in your own quiet room, wondering why something felt off long before you had words for it, trust that knowing. It is the beginning.